285 pounds. It must be just people saying that I'm loud.
Hi, can you just keep it down, please?
Sure.
Because I'm 2 doors up, I'm stuck at 10-hour flight and the shouting. It's just woken me.
Sure, sorry. And so we're calming down. Coach Greg, in today's video, did I get it wrong? I'm reading the comments, and the number one comment, me saying that Chris Bumstead won by a mile.
What more does he have to prove? He wins by a mile. It's not close. It's not like, oh, maybe he won, maybe Ramon Dino. A lot of people Ramon Dino.
And so apparently Ramon Dino's fans are strong. They feel Ramon Dino actually won. And in me saying that Chris won by a mile and that he's going to win next year if he doesn't in fact retire, that I'm out to lunch, that Ramon Dino has it in the bag. Next year, it's his year. And so I'm going to keep an open mind. And I'm going to say, well, do they have a point? And so I read the first comment and they did in fact make a very valid statement. Let me read this comment. Last year, Chris was miles ahead of everyone else. This year, Ramon's improvements made him look comparable to Chris, even though Chris also made improvements from last year. This only shows how insane Ramon's genetics are. I think he was the most improved athlete in this lineup, and he still was 5 pounds under his limit. Next year, I think he can beat Chris. First things first. Was I off in saying that Chris won by a mile? Well, let's examine the scorecards. If all the judges, every single one, had Chris in first place, he would have a perfect score of 5 points. And if every single judge had Ramon in second place, he would have a second place score of 10 points. And what does the judges' scorecard say? Chris had a score of 5. A perfect score. Not a single judge, none of them, thought that Ramon beat Chris. And so clearly, Chris dominated. But did he in fact win by a mile? Well, I'm here to say, I think he did. But does that mean that Ramon can't beat him next year? Well, after reading the comment about how light Ramon was, there is in fact a possibility. Ramon Dino is 5 pounds under the weight class. And so if Ramon Dino were to put on 5 pounds, and assuming Chris is at his best, it is in fact possible that Ramon Dino could in fact move into the first place position. However, I watched Chris at the press conference and he stated, I didn't have to push at all. He very easily made the weight class. And so if Chris wanted to, if he wanted to push supplements even further, he could very easily put on 5 pounds of muscle, dehydrate slightly, and regain it on stage. Remember Larry Wheels? Larry Wheels competed at 232. He's now 285 pounds. It must be just people saying that I'm loud.
Hi, can you just keep it down, please?
Sure.
Because I'm 2 doors up, I'm stuck at 10-hour flight and the shouting. It's just woken me.
Sure, sorry. And so we're calming down. And so remember, Larry Wheels has gained 53 pounds in 5 days since the Olympia. And so I'm certain if Chris really wanted to, he could lose more weight and then regain it. But the thing is, he doesn't have to. Also, in this comment, it didn't mention that Chris tore his lat 10 weeks out. He couldn't even train it for a month. And so if Chris actually could prep 100% injury-free, I do believe he could come in even better. And so is it possible that Ramon Dino could leapfrog Chris next year? Yes, I do believe he can. But it's very difficult for him to do so. And so unless Chris gets injured, unless something happens where he can't come in at his best, I don't think Ramon is going to be able to do enough to jump into first place over Chris. Chris was still miles ahead of everyone this year. What you on about? Miles ahead is crazy. Ahead is fine. Yes, Chris looked a little bigger, a little better, but miles ahead is a stretch. Relax, Greg Doucette. Sebum won't kiss you, so at least say the truth once. And so although I think Chris looks amazing, I also think Ramon Dino looks amazing. I'm just telling you what I see. And apparently I see the same thing as the judges. 5 first place votes. I don't see it as being close. Derek Lunsford against Hadi, that was close. And I stated so. And some of the judges had Hadi in first, some had Derek in first. In this situation, they all had Chris in first. Classic physique is all about the flow, symmetry, the V-taper, etc. Chris fits that criteria better. Where were you? Miles away? Well, I was about 20 rows back. Where were you? I was 20 rows back. I could clearly see what I was looking at. Sebum is still young. If he wants to continue, he will still bring a bigger and better physique. The question is Is it worth it for C-Bum to still continue after a lot of setbacks and injuries? That's it. Wake up, dude. And I think that states it best. If Chris wants to keep winning, I think he's going to win 5 more titles. Unless he gets injured, unless he simply can't make it to the stage, I think Chris continues to win. But perhaps having that great of physique, with those kind of genetics, with a waist that small, with those insertions, maybe that predisposes him to injury. After all, I don't believe he's pushing the supplements. I don't think he's blasting and taking as many things supplement-wise as he could. I think he's holding himself back. I don't think he trains as hard once he does the show. I think he relaxes, takes a break. He goes perhaps off, maybe HRT alone. That's it. And he does what he needs to do to come in at his best. Personally, I prefer if they all lost 10 pounds. I don't want to see them as big. I'd like Chris Bumstead when he was 22 years of age. When he first did the Olympia, I thought that's plenty of muscle. We don't need any more. Ramon just started bodybuilding. Go see him 3 years ago. He was an amateur beginning his career. The way he improves year after year is just 2 to 3 times the others. And so that is also a great point. Chris Bumstead, we know openly, he stated he was taking performance-enhancing drugs since the age of 18. I don't believe Chris has as much room for improvement as Ramon Dino. And Ramon being 5 pounds under the weight class, if he can put on those 5 pounds, and perhaps even more than that, perhaps he puts on 10 pounds, dehydrates 5, and then regains those 5 pounds. Perhaps he can gain 10 pounds of muscle and still make the weight class. And if Chris is injured and unable to train, perhaps lacking the same motivation year after year, imagine, it's got to play a toll on his mind. You're getting injured every single prep. It's got to be playing a toll on his mind. He's got to be thinking, am I going to get hurt this year? Am I really going to push that extra rep? Am I really going to go and train heavier than last time? I don't think so. I'm too scared. I'm too nervous. I don't want to get hurt. And so perhaps Chris has to hold back. He perhaps doesn't diet as hard. It's very hard to get to sub 4% body fat for competition. And so perhaps Chris says, I've had enough. I can't do it. And so I see 2 things happening. Either Chris retires this year, but if he doesn't retire this year, he comes back and he's going to win. There is no way in my mind that Chris shows up next year not looking better than ever before. He's not going to show up and give Ramon Dino a chance. And so if he doesn't retire, Chris is winning. The only way I see Ramon Dino beating Chris is if Chris retires. That's it. Plain, simple, end of story. Ha ha ha. I guess you're on crack. He barely scraped by Ramon. Actually, Ramon could have won. I'm telling you, if Ramon Dino had beat Chris Bumstead, the entire audience would have been in shock. It was unfathomable to think that Chris could lose. It wasn't close. It wasn't maybe. We weren't hanging on the edge of our feet. I literally was zooming in on Chris's face because I knew he was going to win. I want to get his reaction. Got almost 4 million views in one day on Instagram. People wanted to see Chris's reaction ready to win. It was so obvious I didn't even bother filming them both because I knew there was no possible way Chris would lose. Chris is 2 pounds under his weight limit. Ramon will not beat Chris if he decides to compete next year. He is ahead of Ramon by at least a mile. There you go. He won by a mile. He perhaps won by 2 miles. I don't know how to quantify it as winning by a certain margin of error. We don't know what that is, but he was clearly the winner. He was a standout knockout champion. When we looked at open bodybuilding, Derek won, but not by a mile. He won by a little bit. But in classic physique, it was a unanimous slam dunk victory. Now, here's one thing I want to point out. If there was no such thing as Chris Bumstead, if Chris Bumstead had never been born, Ramon Dino would be the most popular men's physique bodybuilder by a mile. Irvs is a very good classic physique competitor. But now that I've seen them year after year, I do not think that Irvs can beat Ramon. Just because I cheer for Irvs and I've done a video with him, I've competed with him, doesn't mean I'm going to say, oh, he's going to beat somebody if he can't. And so after seeing him last year and this year, having put on all that extra muscle and seeing his physique at the end, I don't think he can beat Ramon. Ramon simply has a better, more aesthetic, classic physique than Irvs. And so despite the fact that Irvs put on all that muscle, he still cannot defeat Chris. He can't defeat Ramon. And so I'm just telling you what I think. I'm not sucking up to anyone. I just give you my unbiased, honest feedback of what I think is going to happen. And what I think is going to happen is Chris is going to retire. And if Chris doesn't retire, he's going to win by another mile. Every time he competes, he's going to be a slam dunk victory. I don't think he's going to come in and maybe have a chance to lose. He's only going to want to compete if he can dominate. He's dominated for several years in a row now. I don't think he can go back to fighting it out and maybe hoping to win. I don't see that happening. He's got over 20 million followers. He has nothing left to prove. And so I personally think Chris gonna retire. And so let me know in the comment section, does this clear it up? Did Chris dominate this show? Did he in fact win by a mile? Do you think Ramon will beat Chris next year if Chris does in fact compete? Don't forget, I have harder than last time supplements. So many different kinds, from creatine, protein powders, pre-workouts to all the fancy things. Don't have time to name them all. You're going to have to go to the website. Also, the cookbooks, training books, coaching plans by me and my team, this clothing line that I have, you can get it on the website, free diet and training program as well. Head over to my website, click the link in the description. Don't forget to comment. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to click that bell button. Those 2 bloops, check those out. And until next time, I'm out.